Hello and thank you for watching this DHIS2 demonstration video. My name is Sarah Godden of Logical Outcomes. This presentation will include an introduction to the use of DHIS2 for monitoring and evaluation, a demonstration of some of the key features, and links to helpful resources. To begin, a brief introduction about Logical Outcomes and the developers of DHIS2, the University of Oslo. I represent Logical Outcomes, a Canadian nonprofit with a mission to build organizational evaluation and learning capacity in order to improve lives. We've learned that no M&E software is perfect. They are all constantly changing. Often, software implementations go over budget, over schedule, and may not deliver as promised. It can be difficult to make a decision selecting a software when you may not know all of the cost trade-offs. In 2014, we were hired by SNV to scan the software landscape for a flexible, cost-effective monitoring and evaluation platform that was easy to set up and simple to use. We were impressed by District Health Information System 2, developed by the University of Oslo. DHIS2 supports the 8 functions of not-for-profit evaluations listed below. If you're curious, read our review of different softwares at bit.ly/ydhis2. DHIS2 is a modular web-based software package built with free and open source Java frameworks operating under a BSD license. It is a global digital good developed by the University of Oslo in Norway. DHIS2 is currently adopted as the National Health Management Information System in over 65 countries. If we included NGO-based programs, DHIS2 is now in use in more than 100 countries. This graphic shows the flexibility of data inputs and outputs. Information can be imported into DHIS2 from Excel or other formats, directly entered on a mobile device, directly entered onto the computer, or integrated with many other softwares. DHIS2 is a data warehouse and can be hosted in the cloud or on-site. Some of the outputs include flexible dashboards, reports, graphs, and maps. Let's take a look at one of the first steps in building a DHIS2 database, and that is creating the metadata you will use to track your program or project. Feel free to follow along. Visit dhis2.org. Learn, Demos. Let's use the last stable release of DHIS2, which will be version 2.3. Many of the feature videos you'll find on the DHIS2 website are for version 2.3 and 2.29. Take a look at the bottom message here, log in with admin district. This demonstration space is open to the public and refreshes every night. You can enable two-factor authentication. You can enable a forgot password feature. You can customize the login screen to colors and flags and logos of your choosing, and including a welcome message here and an instructional message below. The user interface of DHIS2 is fairly intuitive. Along the top, I'll have my main profile menu and the apps menu, this grid of squares where most of the activities will happen. When I log in, I'm taken to the dashboard screen. Dashboards appear in these gray bubbles. Clicking a dashboard will open it. We'll look more at dashboards shortly. The first step in creating your DHIS2 database is setting up your metadata. This might include indicators and all the related measures that you need to capture, analyze, and share the results. How we'll do that is in this maintenance app. You'll see along the top I have different types of data elements and related measures that I can input. Often we start with data elements, categories, and option sets. For an example, let's take a look at the data elements that already exist in this demo space. They are organized alphabetically but I could search a particular name type or one with a particular category combination. Let's take a look at an HIV age plus gender category combination. It's going to pull up the different data elements that are using that category combination. So I can manually input metadata, or I can import it from a CSV file. Let's take a look at one data element in particular. Each data element has a certain number of fields that must be described. Name, short name. The code can be provided by the user, but DHIS2 will provide a code as well for every piece of information. This is helpful for the new Android apps. You can choose colors and icons to match your data element. If your program is tracking beneficiaries over time, you would say it's for the tracker portion of DHIS2. You'll take some thought. What kind of value type is your data element? An age, an integer, or a percentage?
Creating indicators can be a little intimidating, but if you follow the DHIS2 user manual, you'll be all right. So this manual includes definitions, step-by-step instructions, and screenshots. The first step is to define what type of indicator you are dealing with, then to describe it. That would include assigning it a code, picking the type that it would fall under, giving it a description, and other descriptions. Then we might place that indicator into a group. This helps us when creating reports later, as we can click an indicator group, which would make 6 or a dozen or more different indicators appear rather than having to select them all individually. You can build on indicator groups. For example, you might have a set of gender measures that you then want to combine with your nutrition indicators and look at both at the same time.
Now let's combine our data elements into programs and data sets. A data set is a data collection form that is not tracking a beneficiary or an event. So for example, the stock levels or assessing a facility or expenditures. Each data set has a number of data elements. So these are pushed over by using these arrow buttons from the master list of data elements that have already been imported into the system. Along with picking the data elements, you can choose things like how long this data set would stay open for. Perhaps it's a monthly form. You can choose the period type, how often you want people to be completing this form, and a category combination like who are the implementing partners, or maybe there's multiple projects that you're working on, and every time this data set's completed, you'll be picking that specific project. Let's see what a data set looks like in action. From my main apps menu, I will click Data Entry. Now this view, it's a little bit mixed up. Okay, so first, as a data entry person, I would need to select where I'm entering my data for. Then I move over to the particular data set. Let's pick expenditures. We were just looking at this. And of course the period. Now this is a quick and dirty form. I might include just something like the numbers of things. Might not make sense to you, doesn't make sense to me. Let's complete that form. If I had validation rules, I can either pick this, or if there was something that I did not meet, for example, in the cars field, let's say I had a min or a max limit and I was outside those limits, the box would turn red, or I'd get a pop-up message that would say, please check your answer. So I've just opened up the audit trail box, which is another great feature that will show you the history, both of when the data element was created, and then as values were entered. So I'm the first person to enter a value for this particular location, data set, period. So there's no trail. But if I were to come back, I could see my record.
Now let's take a quick look at the metadata you need to create a program that is an event or a tracked entity. So I'm back in the maintenance app here. You'll notice along the top. I'm going to start by visiting program. The first step is to define what it is you're tracking. So an event is an event. You don't need to define that. But for the more complicated tracker capture portion, you need to define what it is that you're looking to track. This might be a person. It might be a stock level. So there's nothing created in this is our logical outcomes demo space, but that's your first step. There might be relationships between the entities, like a mother-child or a student-teacher. You can also set up program rules like scoring or other measures that may be used in your program. These are a little bit different from validation rules that appear in data sets we just looked at. And it's interesting, this can be a little complicated, developing a tracker capture program. The DHIS2 user manual is fairly good, and there's a lot of good YouTube training videos as well. But the meat of what we're doing is, let's take a look at what a new program would be like. So you see in the bottom right, I have the choice between an event and a tracker. Let's go for the more complicated tracker. So what we would do is name the program. There's a lot of other information I can include to describe my program. Then I want to decide who or what am I enrolling in this program. And what attributes am I collecting from this entity when I enroll them? Usually it's a person and you're collecting demographic information like age, ID, something like that. Last, you would create different program stages. So a stage could repeat itself. So you might have a clinic visit as a stage, and you can have as many clinic visits as you like. There are other programs that have very unique and clearly defined stages that have to happen in sequence. Or you could have one repeating stage and then 3 that must happen in order. So this is where you would set up as well who can access your program, to what org unit level it's assigned to, and if you want to see notifications like alerts sent to your email or SMS. So there's quite a lot here, but the interface you'll see is decent to navigate throughout. So we've taken a little look in the maintenance app to create data elements, put them together in data sets, which will come just next. And quickly, we've looked at the tracker capture and event program building piece.
Before or after data collection begins, the system admin or M&E lead can create some report templates that will begin to populate when information starts flowing.
Let's take a look at creating reports. So I can do this in Data Visualizer, the GIS. I can do it in Pivot Table. Let's start there. Now this particular training instance I'm using does not have a lot of information yet, but to create a report, you'd need 3 things. The data. So you might have an indicator group that you are wanting to present, or a specific single data element. Let's pick an indicator group. And we actually just have one indicator. Now you might have a dozen or more that live under an indicator group. The period of time, you could use a fixed period or one that moves along as our time moves along. So let's try this year and last year. And organization units, this is the location. So you could pick an individual unit just by clicking through here. Or you might say, let's do all of the field office levels. You might say, let's do an org unit group. For example, you might have watershed areas or public and religious funded schools as 2 different groups. It's really up to you to set the parameters here. Now, I am not certain anything will appear for this particular report, but you can get a sense of the information. So this is both 12 months and the 2 previous years. So maybe I would remove that, press update. This is actually a good exercise to create your templates in advance of data coming in. So I might want to save my report template. I could add a description if I like. Then favorites can be opened from this menu here. You'll notice I can also share a link to this report. These can be embedded in websites if that is a way that you desire to present the information. Otherwise, reports are usually added to dashboards and live within DHIS2. The different download options are here. Let's toggle over to charts and see if I have a report that I can open that's already been created. Okay, so this has 2 target lines established here in bold, and I'm looking at male teachers trained, comparing 2 years. So there was only 2 and 3. Not a lot of action here. But what I'd like to show you is along the top, while you're in charts, you can pick different orientations, different chart types. And always you can come to the side and modify. Say I only want to look at this last year, and I want to include only 3 countries. Okay, and you'll notice the title of the report changes. Now, you can play around with the layout. For a pie chart, there isn't much action you can see, but if you have more complicated tables or charts, you can move around the different dimensions here. Options will allow you to modify the tick lines you're seeing on your axes, chart titles, subtitles, things like that. But again, whenever you make a change, you're going to want to save your report.
I'm going to return to DHIS2.org just for a minute to highlight this new Android tab. Using DHIS2 on a mobile device is huge, and it's a big and growing part of the development as well. So they have a full Android team at the University of Oslo who's been working very hard on improving this app that you're seeing here. What's new is all of the different ways of entering information, whether it be an event, a tracker capture, or just a regular data set, are all integrated in one app. Previously, it used to be 3 separate apps. We've also got icons and colors which can be customized so that your staff can start to recognize which programs or data sets are which. The apps are designed to function offline. So you log in with internet. There is a 4-letter or number code that you can use to block or lock your app while you're doing other work. You can save many hundreds of records on the phone without having internet. And then when you're back into a Wi-Fi zone, the app should automatically sync, or you can visit this little home tab and sync the data yourself. So take a look at this Android tab. There's quite a lot here. Unfortunately, I don't have a demonstration set up on my computer, but we've also looked already at data entry. I quickly showed you when we were looking at data sets how you would do this. We've looked quickly at event capture and also tracker capture from that spotlight demonstration. Now I'm going to visit an app called Import Export. Let's say we have information that we're receiving monthly from another partner on Excel sheets. I want to data import. There are a few different formats I can import information. Common would be CSV or JSON. Now sometimes it might make sense to build an automatic connection between another piece of software and DHIS2. That's very much possible, and that happens through the API. So that's a little bit of coding programming we can discuss, or you can take a look at DHIS2 API user documentation. I'll quickly flip back to our website and show you where you can find more than you ever wanted to know about DHIS2 here. They've designed guides for different users. So we probably wouldn't be operating on a developer level, but the implementer guide has a lot of very useful information. Basic use would be found in this user guide. So it's quite nice. If you want to learn about tracker capture, I could Control F tracker and find where that information is here. The user guide is updated regularly and does include screenshots as well. So you could learn more about doing data entry here, setting up your workflow. There's a lot to read in the DHIS2 documentation. So the point here is that data collection is quite flexible. I could import it from a file. I could integrate it with a system. I could enter directly from my computer or my Android mobile device. In a previous slide, I showed you how to do data entry on a computer. You've just seen what the new Android app looks like. Let's take a look at a tracker capture program. This would be entering from the computer. First, you'd select the program itself and the organization unit where that entity belongs. First, you can enter a name, which might help to identify if there are any duplicates in the system. Otherwise, you can press continue. Another way to get started with Tracker is search the record list. So you can either click this icon here to list everything. You can search active participants. You can pop out a menu and do a custom search. Once you've enrolled your entity into the program, you're taken to the entity dashboard. This is a neat way you can select which metric you'd like to show right at the top. That's a new feature. Otherwise, you will be conducting data entry through different program stages, they are called. This is an example where 2 stages have already been complete and 2 have been opened but not yet completed. Stages can be the same, repeat, they can be custom. You might have a dozen unique stages that have to happen in sequence, setting timelines in between each, and notifications to email or SMS when the events are due or someone is expected to come for an appointment, for example. A lot of possibilities. Click this slide to watch a detailed video about tracker capture, created by the University of Oslo. To finish this demonstration, I'd like to talk a bit about users and return to dashboards. So most system users may be data entrants or people creating and viewing reports. Most users would not have access to this user's app. Most users would not be involved in metadata maintenance or scheduling or system settings. You can actually customize this menu for each user. So for example, if someone is only doing event captures, they might only need this app plus the event report apps that go along with it. Every user first needs to determine the type of role that they would like to have. So in these examples, let's look at data entry clerk. There are certain authorities that a data entry clerk will have. And these can be found by using the filter and moving authorities just from one box to another. So there's not much here aside from naming the role and selecting the authorities. But let's look back at this list because this will give us ideas about the types of user roles that you might need in your organization. Very few people should have super user, maybe 1 or 2 admins. It's nice to have a backup. A user manager might be one person who is responsible for creating both users and user roles, but you don't need many people to have this role. So once we've created the user role, we can then create the user. So let's add a new user. You'll see the mandatory fields are a username. We typically use our email address because that's unique. A password, which you can then ask the user to reset it themselves by visiting their own settings. Email address, mobile phone number, which is useful later if you want to use SMS or alerts to people's cell phones. Each user could have a default language, but this can also be selected by the user themselves in the settings. Now, interface language is everything we see in the menus here, while database is that custom metadata that each project or program is bringing in. So there are over 20 different interface languages available, but you have to provide the database language yourself. So if you want to have English and Chinese, you would have to import your metadata in both of those languages. So let's say I'd like to set myself up as a user manager. I also need to decide, where do I need data capture authorities and where do I need data output? So think of this as data entry. So I'm a user manager. I probably need the whole system so that I can set up users anywhere. Data output, as a user manager, my role really isn't about analysis. It's more just about creating users. So I'll just click the whole Sierra Leone as well. But let's say, for example, I had a data entry clerk instead. Side note, you can't have multiple roles for one person, so keep that in mind. The data entry clerk may need to only work in one facility, so I would just select that there. But I may want the data entry clerk to see information for all of the levels above them. So they may not be able to enter data sets for the Bow region, but they can see results that other people have entered. You can also set up user groups. Now this is nice when you want to share a dashboard with a user group, or a message or an interpretation. So this might be set up on a program or a project basis, or might be by partner. So setting up users is very reasonable. It's not too difficult. There's nice documentation in the user guide on the DHIS2 website. In action, you can use, as I noted, the user group to share different pieces of information. So this is my immunization dashboard, and right now I could share it with, let's see, let's say all the data entry clerks or a project or a program. You'll see this one also has public access. So that means anyone who has a login account, it doesn't mean anyone in the public, but anyone who can log into this space would be able to see this dashboard. Now it's nice to have reports available for all of your users. Not all of your reports, but when people log in, it's exciting to see a favorite or a most important dashboard or the global roll-up for your program. It engages users. You might have dozens of dashboards. So here's an example. There's about 20 or 25 different dashboards for this project. Each dashboard could be shared with a different user group. I'm now in the 2.3 official demonstration space to show you how easy it is to create and edit your dashboards. To create a new one, I'll press this plus sign in the corner. I'll add my title, a description below, and I'll look for items to add to my map. Now I can add a text box like a message, an actual message. Now that's related to this icon up here, where there's like an email system set up that you can use. I can also add spacing if I need, but really I want charts, reports, pivot tables, maps, and I can simply add them by clicking these buttons. I can move around reports like this. Let's say I'm satisfied, I will save it. Now each dashboard along this space here has a spot for editing, sharing with other users, and then if you had many, many reports on your dashboard, you could filter. In addition to this message feature here, there's also built-in interpretations. Think of a Facebook chat or a conversation that you might want to have about this chart. I can click interpretations and add my own comment here. I can reply edit like to my other colleagues' comments. We can open this report in the visualizer mode and maybe modify it a little bit more to zoom in on certain values or areas that we're discussing. I can also click the interpretations icon up here, and then I'm taken to a big list of all the discussions that have happened.
You'll see we've got some social analytics up here, the top 5 interpretations in the last month. In this demo space, there's not a lot of activity, but you can imagine if you had a big staff team communicating, you could have some action going on. So this is just to show some test comments on reports. And again, you can open the report by clicking Explore if you like.
We've just skimmed the surface of all the features and functionality available within DHIS2. Here's where you can go to learn more. The DHIS2 website includes downloads for the actual database file, lots of user documentation, the Sierra Leone demonstration instance that you saw in this video, spotlight videos that highlight certain features in more detail, and a roadmap, what's coming in the future. You can also find information on official training events called academies and a lot more. Some very exciting new news from the University of Oslo is they have put together a community of practice for all DHIS2 users. Now this is an interactive site where anyone using DHIS2 can get in touch with other users and the developers with their questions, concerns, comments. It's a new community, so it is growing, but the idea is you could also come in and search your question, and you're looking through a bank of thousands and thousands of emails that over the years the developers have been collecting. They are now tagged, so it's quite easy to get your answers. The current way is we would email a user group and wait for someone to get in touch with us. Now the user group was very active, but it wasn't an effective way to offer sustainable solutions, as you'd have to be tracking hundreds of emails every week, which is very unreasonable. So we are very excited that this new community of practice is now available. Otherwise, I, as a logical outcomes service lead for DHIS2, would be happy to answer any of your questions if you want to contact info@logicaloutcomes.net. Thank you very much for joining.